Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Marty Chen and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are continuing with the reading of Guardian, also known as Zheng. This is volume 1 and I don't know what happened with the uploading. No matter how many times I tried to re-upload it and fix the problem, for some reason YouTube was just not downloading the last 3 minutes of my previous video, so I figured I'd finish out what I said here because part of it was very important. So anyway, what I was saying was that I am finding Guardian to be of interest now, but I can tell already, unless things change significantly, that this isn't going to be a Danmei series that I just absolutely die for. I don't think it's really going to be something I rave about, and it's not because I think it's not good or anything, but mostly because of the genre that it is in. More in the supernatural. I wouldn't call it horror or anything like that because I have heard people say that, and this doesn't feel like that to me. But just with what it's dealing with, not that I don't like supernatural things, I do, but reading this genre, whatever you would put it in, it's just not for me. Which is ironic because as a child, I definitely remember reading books like this and I loved them. I loved horror as well. But, you know, things change. And as an adult, like now, I don't really care for horror. I still love gore though. Ugh, you got my heart there. But anyway, yeah, so I probably won't be doing a video of like my favorite aspects of Guardian by Priest. That was one thing that I was saying. Now, the second thing that is a bit of more importance is that since I have told you all why you didn't get a video on Friday, I am trying to figure out how I'm going to handle this week and maybe even next week as far as reading is concerned, because after having 3 periods in 1 month and just being like so exhausted and everything, I need a break. However, because of how I know I feel about this novel series, I don't want to stop because I know once the momentum stops, I might not pick it back up or I might be more reluctant to pick it back up. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to find ways to navigate around like my energy and whatnot and still provide you with the readings. But I'm thinking maybe on Tuesday and Thursday, you won't have a reading just so I can rest. But I still need to figure something out because I want us to finish this book this week. As you guys know, typically speaking, I try not to spend more than 2 weeks on one book. That is my goal so we can stay on schedule. Nevertheless, yeah, I'm thinking Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I will try to finish this book, which means more reading on the days before, but I'll get days of rest. So let's go ahead and get into it now because I feel like I'm rambling and we just need to go ahead and get into the story. So we're moving into Arc 2, which is titled Mountain River Awl. The offices of 4 Bright Avenue were far from being a cavern full of webs or a nest of bones. In daylight hours, there was no indication at all of any ghostly presence. The daytime doorman was a kindly old gent who seemed entirely ordinary, although Changcheng eventually realized that the man wasn't as normal as he seemed. His hobby was making bone sculptures, so there were often all sorts of bones stashed around the gatehouse. Throwing open a door in there would fill the air with a cloud of yellowish white dust. The Criminal Investigations Unit's office was bright and clean with excellent lighting. Every employee had their own desk and computer, and the office supplies were well stocked. There were even plants. A part-time janitor came and cleaned every day at 2 p.m. sharp. The office had central air. A small side room was equipped with a fridge and cupboard. Cat food was stored there, along with yogurt, fruit, and other snacks that staff could help themselves to. Changcheng had initially been mystified by the discovery of a freezer drawer full of the kind of sliced raw meat used for hot pot. Then one day he saw Zhu Hong, the office beauty, grab a pack. Once it thawed, she ate it the way other girls ate chips, dipping each slice in blood. The next day, she called in sick due to the usual monthly trouble, Except in her case, it wasn't what one might assume. When she came back to work on the third day, Changcheng gawked at the sight of her massive python tail. While she was in that state, Zhu Hong ate raw, bloody meat for several days, after which she was back to walking around on 2 feet and eating like a human again. There was one more member of the criminal investigation unit, besides the gorgeous snake lady, the fake monk, and the black cat. 2 weeks after the Hunger Ghost incident, the last colleague finally returned from a work trip, worn out from his travels. He sat in the corner for a whole afternoon, silently filling out reimbursement forms, and then put his head on his desk and fell asleep until Director Zhao heard he was back and personally sent him home. The nameplate on the man's desk said, Chu Shuzhi. Everyone called him Chuga, but Changcheng didn't have the nerve to strike up a conversation. Chu Shuzhi looked around the same age as Jing. He was so skinny that his cheeks were hollow, just skin stretched over bone. It gave him a ferocious look. His brows were always furrowed, and it might have just been Changcheng's imagination, but any time Chu Shuzhi laid eyes on him, that furrow seemed to deepen. Things were normally quiet at the Special Investigations Department. Once the flurry of activity during Changcheng's first few days settled, he realized it was a textbook case of a job that was high pay, minimal work, and close to home. In the course of a month, 2 or maybe 3 cases would reach the SID. When a case hit their desk, Zhao Yunlan dispatched 1 or 2 people to check it out, strictly sticking to their mandate of dealing only with supernatural business. More often than not, cases in the mortal realm that looked supernatural in nature turned out to just be humans fooling around, so whoever was sent to take a look would come back and write a report, and that was that. And when there wasn't a case, everyone sat at their desks and read, browsed online, or chatted, generally just killing time until the workday ended. Changcheng slowly came to understand how many steps were involved when the SID took on a case. The first step was that preliminary look by the team. Once they'd written a report and submitted it to Zhao Yunlan, he would use it to decide whether or not to take the case. If he felt it fell under the SID's jurisdiction, he prepared a report of his own, affixed the official seal, and sent it up the chain. If the situation was urgent, his superiors gave their approval within a business day. At that point, every office involved was sent an order clarifying each division's rights and responsibilities to ensure that the SID was free to carry out their work. That was usually the point when Zhao Yunlan would finally show up in person and contact the public security departments involved with the case. The murder of Lu Zhuomei in Dragon City occurred during the Ghost Festival. There was no one on duty in the office, but it was a local incident, and while at the crime scene, Dah-ching caught a whiff of something from the netherworld. Under the circumstances, Zhao Yunlan made the executive decision to act first and ask for permission later, going back to observe the formalities once the case was closed. It resulted in so much paperwork that Jing's butt didn't touch a chair for 3 days. As for Changcheng, despite not even having half a case to deal with, he survived his 3-month trial period and was miraculously kept on. The even greater miracle was that Zhao Yunlan seemed to have forgotten that he'd ever gritted his teeth against the urge to kick Changcheng out. He was happy to sign Changcheng's application to become a regular full-time employee, and Changcheng, now accustomed to the HR department being empty during the day, happily bounced over with his application to have it put in his record. After watching him bumble off, Daqing jumped onto Zhao Yunlan's desk, tail up. Men sure are fickle. Not that long ago, you wanted to kick him out like a ball, but now you're keeping him. Without looking up from his texting, Zhao Yunlan said, "The merits on him are as thick as an Oxford dictionary. So, he has stupidly good luck. I'm keeping him as a lucky charm. Besides, The kid's pretty funny. I actually agree with that. Okay, so Dah-ching was confused. What merits? Zhao Yunlan pointed at his drawer. The black cat wiggled his butt over, opened the drawer, and dug out a large envelope. It contained documentation of Guo Changcheng's contributions to the Poverty Alleviation Program, volunteer photographs, and commemorative donation albums. The list went on. There was also a photocopy of a photo, which showed a postcard hanging on the wall of a mountain elementary school. In a disastrous scrawl, it read, "Take care, you guys." Guo Changcheng, it turned out, had sponsored many, many impoverished students. The oldest documents went back 10 years. Shocked, Daqing said, "Guo Changcheng did all of this?" Mm-hmm. Thanks to his family situation, he's probably never wanted for anything in his life. But for some reason, he's done all of this in secret. Maybe just because he's shy. Even his family and relations don't know. They all think his allowance is enough, so the kid's been tight on money all these years. Someone like that doesn't come along every day. The cat, who had gotten distinctly fatter, shook his head and sighed. Shamelessly invading Zhao Yunlan's personal space, he peeked at the phone screen. His tone turned to contempt. "You still got it or not? You keep saying he's secretly in love with you. Every single day you harass the man with all your flirting and asking how he is, but you're now only asking him out for a meal?" Zhao Yunlan hit send and flicked Daqing's forehead, knocking him onto his butt. "Shows what you know. Slow work yields refined results. This is the thrill of the chase." Shun Wei's reply appeared on the screen. "I'm afraid not. I have to attend a grade meeting tonight." The cat laughed so hard that he nearly rolled onto his back and off the table. Grade meeting. A grade meeting. So much for your big talk. Didn't you say you can land anyone you set your sights on? Something about how when girls see you, their eyes light up, and when bottoms see you, they drool. Look how gently he let you down. Tell me, Zhao Yunlan. I'm sorry, I ended up laughing for real. Okay. Tell me. Okay, I'm okay now. Tell me, Zhao Yunlan, does rejection hurt? Zhao Yunlan gnashed his teeth, feeling a sudden craving for cat meat. After the Hunger Ghost incident, Zhao Yunlan made sure to keep in touch with Shun Wei. At first, he'd used the excuse of his job and keeping Shun Wei up to date on Li Tian's case. Then he'd become even more brazen, finding any reason to ask Shun Wei out. Whether Shun Wei was actually incredibly busy or just determined to avoid him was impossible to say. But for all the luck Zhao Yunlan was having, he might as well have been trying to meet the emperor. Anyone else would have taken a step back by now. But Zhao Yunlan wasn't just anyone. He was a first-class narcissist and still had the absolute conviction that Shun Wei felt a tug of attraction for him. He was tired of people throwing themselves at him, so Shun Wei's behavior was a turn-on. The more reserved and passive the professor was, the hotter Zhao Yunlan's heart burned. The phone rang. Daqing leaned in to listen, eager for gossip. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar and nervous. "Hello? Mr. Zhao, right? You said you wanted to buy my grandpa's collection of ancient texts? Was that a serious offer?" Zhao Yunlan's eyes lit up. Yes, absolutely. When can we meet? If it's convenient, sooner is better than later." The caller said, "Then the price, what do you think?" "I don't see any problem," Zhao Yunlan replied, for all the world as if he were rich. "Hurry and name a price, please." The person sounded very excited. Even after agreeing to meet that afternoon, they kept exclaiming things like, "You must have real love for ancient tomes," and "I see you value our cultural heritage." Finally, With great reluctance, they hung up. Nice, Dah-ching said sarcastically. If you can't get him, shower him with gifts. You're the model of a modern, rich, good-for-nothing young master, oh guardian. The poor kid selling the books must not realize you're some illiterate youth who loves blockbuster films and wuxia novels. Zhao Yunlan gathered his wallet and car keys, grabbed the scruff of Daqing's neck, and threw him out of the office while the cat yowled pitifully. Everyone opposite the office heard the door opening. Zhu Shuji looked up from his stocks in time to see someone rush by. Zhu Hong sighed. There he goes, off to screw around again. That evening, Zhao Yunlan successfully caught Shun Way outside a Dragon City University lecture building. Shun Wei's eyelid twitched at the sight of his car. He lowered his head and quickened his pace, feigning obliviousness as he walked to the parking lot. Zhao Yunlan didn't call out to him, just hummed a little tune while tailing him in his car. Shun Wei kept up the act the whole way, and Zhao Yunlan followed him the whole way in turn. Every student who saw what was going on watched curiously. Shun Wei's skin wasn't thick enough to endure a whole crowd of onlookers. Admitting defeat, he changed course and approached Zhao Yunlan. Officer Zhao, are you looking for me? Zhao Yunlan rolled down his window with a sunny grin. Grabbing a huge wooden box from the passenger seat, he shoved it out the window and into Shun Wei's arms. For you. Shun Wei was speechless at the gift. Opening the box, he took one look and pushed it back. No, this is too expensive. Hey, hear me out. Zhao Yunlan stopped him and earnestly said, These aren't gifts from me. They're from a friend who's planning to emigrate. He owns so many ancient tomes. Some are even made of silk or bamboo strips. He can't take them with him, and he couldn't bear the thought of giving them away. What if they wound up with someone who didn't appreciate how precious they are? But I thought of you immediately. It would be such a waste for them to fall into someone else's hands. Giving them a good home would be a real favor, Shen Laoshu. Like the silver-tongued devil he was, he kept a straight face while lying through his teeth. Shun Wei began, but he only managed that one word before Zhao Yunlan cut him off again. What is it? You and I are close now, but are we even friends if you won't do this little thing for me? Now, I have dinner plans, so I have to go, but I'll see you soon. Take care of the books for me, and I'll buy you dinner tomorrow. Make sure you show up. He stepped on the gas and drove off without giving Shun Wei a chance to speak. The plan had worked beautifully. He'd given the gift and scored a date. He even started to whistle. I'm not really sure if he scored the date, but okay. A man with real estate could never be satisfied with common, vulgar beauty, Zhao Yunlan thought. It was the way things were. Anyone who became rich would have to become cultured and get some antiques and paintings. But Shun Wei. Zhao Yunlan contentedly looked at his own reflection in the rearview mirror and turned the name over in his heart. Shun Wei was like a famous, expensive blue and white vase. Even if you couldn't own it forever, it was worth it just to display it at home for a few days and bask in its glory. Below the Wahng is the netherworld. The soul-executing emissary flew into the netherworld in a black mist. The ghostly immortals all immediately rushed out to bow in greeting as if welcoming an evil god. Some garments were nearly soiled from fear. The emissary gave a slight nod, then looked up as the crowd parted. The magistrate, red-robed like a groom, dashed forward with dainty, trembling steps. He stopped 10 meters away, hurriedly wiping his lowered brow. The words, "My lord," passed his lips, but before he could launch into the pleasantries he'd prepared as he ran, the emissary raised a hand. "Let us speak only of important matters. Is there any news of the reincarnation dial?" The magistrate bobbed his head, tripping over himself to report. "Additional searches have been carried out all over. Every reaper of the netherworld has been dispatched, but I fear there are still no leads. That evil bastard may have used some sort of trick, but my lord, please rest assured, the very moment we have news of the reincarnation dial, you will be notified. The mist over this soul-executing emissary's face concealed his expression, but his gaze was as sharp as his blade. I am certain you all realize this is of utmost importance. The 4 hollowed artifacts hold up the netherworld and all other worlds alike. I fear the mountain River Awl may resurface at any time. Terrified pandemonium broke out before he finished speaking. What? Blurted the magistrate. The 4 hollowed artifacts appearing and the Chaos King of the Gwoh-uh escaping are signs that the Great Seal is already weakening, the emissary continued, not acknowledging any of them. Footnote 23. Just so you all know, Gwoh-uh is ghost, but it can be all-encompassing for other heinous entities. All right, continuing and rereading that sentence. The 4 hollowed artifacts appearing and the Chaos King of the Gwoh-uh escaping are signs that the Great Seal is already awakening, the emissary continued, not acknowledging any of them. We must gather the hollowed artifacts together to reinforce the Great Seal before it shatters completely. Failure to do so will have unimaginable repercussions. The reincarnation dial is already in the Chaos King of Gwoh-uh's hands. We can afford no delays. Solemnly, the magistrate said, This lowly one will report to the 10 kings at once. We will work together with the 3 realms and do all we can to track down the Chaos King of the Gwoh-uh and his faction. Having said his piece, the emissary bid them all farewell and turned to leave without another word. The magistrate hesitated, then called out, My lord, are you returning to the mortal realm? Yes. The emissary was meticulously courteous, but always aloof. He spared a final glance for the magistrate. Goodbye. By the time his voice faded, the emissary was gone, vanished like mist. The magistrate's smile evaporated just as quickly, like a joyful newlywed groom abruptly learning that he married a dead bride. He gave a great sigh. Your Honor, Any time something happens with the Great Seal, it never ends well, the magistrate said slowly. When the seal was first formed, the great god Fuxi fell. The Great Seal loosened twice more after that, once when sovereign Yoo-in-lahn fell, and again when Shun passed away. Footnote number 24. Fuxi, Yoo-in-lahn, and Shun are 3 sovereigns, primordial gods in Chinese mythology. Fuxi, first of the 3 sovereigns, is credited with teaching humanity to cook, fish, hunt, and write. Yoo-in-lahn, second of the 3 sovereigns, created humans and, in traditional mythology, repaired the sky when the pillars supporting it fell. And Shun, the last of the 3 sovereigns, taught the people how to farm and use traditional Chinese medicine. Back to the reading, rereading that section. Anytime something happens with the Great Seal, it never ends well, the magistrate said slowly. When the seal was first formed, the great god Fuxi fell. The Great Seal loosened twice more after that, once when sovereign Yoo-in-lahn fell, and again when Shun passed away. The mountain god of the Great Wild entered the cycle of reincarnation. Now, at the end of time, the power of the stars grows dim and the signs of the primordial gods are nowhere to be found. What will we do when the seal loosens this time? Isn't a soul-executing emissary the protector of the Great Seal? A reaper asked. The soul-executing emissary? The magistrate's laugh was cold. The emissary comes from the same place as the Chaos King of the Gwoh-uh. The only reason he wasn't trapped behind the Great Seal with his Chaos King brother was that the mountain god of the Great Wild elevated him to demigodhood. Do you really believe he'll stand against his own kind? We don't even know how the Chaos King of the Gwoh-uh laid his hands on the reincarnation dial. The Reaper's expression changed. But all those years ago, the mountain god asked him to look after the Great Seal. How weighty is Almighty Fuxi's great seal of heaven and earth? Who but the primordial gods could carry that burden? Back when the pillars of heaven collapsed and the power from Pangu's creation of the world started fading, spiritual powers became rarer and rarer in the mortal realm. The Wu and Yao tribes declined one after another. There was no one to rely on after the mountain god. Very low, the magistrate added. And back then, the mountain god had no choice. Really quickly, I'm going to read footnotes 25, 26, and 27. When it mentioned Pangu, Pangu was the first being in Chinese mythology who came out of the egg containing the universe, split yin from yang, and pushed apart the sky and the earth. Then footnote number 26. In Guardian, the Wu were a race of people who existed in ancient times. The Yao are non-human spirits that have cultivated to consciousness and have longer lifespans. The Reaper was aghast, but in essence, the soul executing emissary is half a primordial god. The mountain god was the last one who could control him. If he ever betrays us, what do we do? The magistrate said nothing for a while. The toll of the death bell sounded from the banks of the Huangquan. There was no breeze, but countless red spider lilies swayed and rustled. A bone-piercing cold emanated from the netherworld, and thousands upon thousands of souls were flung about in the endless cycle of reincarnation. A sigh came from the Yanluo courts. Then we can only try to wake the mountain god. Chapter 14. The temperature in Dragon City dropped practically overnight as winter arrived that year. The leaves were still caught between green and yellow when they fell. Zhao Yunlan didn't mind at all. He'd finally managed to get a date with Shun Way and was riding high as if buoyed by a spring breeze. He'd styled his hair early in the day, and his knee-length coat was crisply ironed. The stylish look highlighted his broad shoulders and slim waist, lending him the gallantry of an immortal tree standing against the wind. Just as he was about to set out, this fine specimen of a tree remembered the final touch and gave his neck a quick spritz of oud wood cologne. Satisfied that he was a feast for all the senses, he strode off to inflict himself on the world. He reached the restaurant precisely on time. It was an upscale Western spot designed with exquisite taste. A small band played leisurely in one corner, filling the space with pleasant, laid-back music. The tables were spaced for an intimate dining experience. The room was dim, but each table sat in a single soft pool of light that made their faces of peach avalanche roses glow. At this time of year, there was a steady procession of Western holidays. Thanksgiving and Christmas ushered in the busy season for Western restaurants, and this one, while it didn't go easy on the wallet, was bustling. Each beam of light illuminated a table with a couple whispering to each other. Zhao Yunlan spotted his date immediately. Shun Way was seated at an isolated corner table, staring at the edge of the tablecloth, lost in thought. The light and music didn't seem to reach him somehow. Half of his face was shadowed, leaving only his blurred side profile visible. There was such a tinge of loneliness and melancholy about him that Zhao Yunlan's breath caught in his throat. His steps were silent as he walked over, moving in time with the violin, but his arrival shattered the bubble of quiet surrounding Shun Way. "Have you been waiting long?" Shun Way twitched, tension overriding his relaxed posture. Zhao Yunlan leaned forward slightly as he sat, making sure that the warm, woody fragrance in his scarf saturated the air around Shun Way. Then he backed off into his own space at once, unbuttoning his coat. "Am I that scary? Why does seeing me make you so nervous?" Shun Way, studying him from outside the pool of light, forced a smile. He stole a few quick glances, then looked away. "Officer Zhao, you're always teasing me." Zhao Yunlan casually accepted the menu from the waiter. "This restaurant has a nice atmosphere, But I don't know if it's to your taste, Shun Laosher. Are there any foods you don't eat? Shun Wei touched a corner of the proffered menu, pushing it lower. Hmm? Zhao Yunlan looked up from perusing the options, arching an eyebrow. He had very defined features. When his eyes were shadowed by the bridge of his nose and his brow, it gave an impression of tenderness. Tension tightened Shun Wei's cheeks. Seeming to come to a decision, he picked up something from beside him and set it carefully on the table. The box of ancient tomes Zhao Yunlan had given him the day before. Zhao Yunlan was a smart man. Just from that silent opening, he knew what was coming. It was suddenly hard to maintain his cool, confident air. Shun Wei's voice cracked. I have only the greatest admiration for you, Officer Zhao. He cleared his throat before continuing. But I may have inadvertently, perhaps I somehow gave the wrong impression. I'm very sorry. All along, Zhao Yunlan's narcissistic assumption had never wavered. Now he was broadsided by the declaration that it had all been in his head. Shun Wei's glasses must have been antiques. With no anti-glare coating, they reflected enough light that his eyes were effectively hidden. It's not a big deal, he continued, but I feel terrible that you spent so much money, Officer Zhao. I thought it best to clear things up as soon as possible. Oh, Zhao Yunlan thought. It was all in my head. I misinterpreted his attempts to turn me down. Even in the mini society of elementary school, he'd been clever and perceptive, an expert at dealing with other people. He could pick up on anyone's intentions from a few words, and he'd always been right. It had been years and years since he'd been in such an awkward situation. It felt like having a chunk of ice stuck in his chest, a hard, frozen lump he couldn't swallow or spit out. The notes of oud wood now smelled like damp rot. In an effort to keep up appearances, he gave a self-depreciating chuckle and put a hand on the box of books. It wasn't a lot of money, honestly. I really did get them from someone else, and I definitely have nowhere to put them. Please keep them. There's no need to waste something precious. Shun Wei began. Zhao Yunlan raised a hand to stop him. Half joking, he said, Have you ever heard that awkwardness and embarrassment are the top 2 negative human emotions? Realizing that I just imagined there was something between us combines them. So it's extra hard to swallow, Shun Laosher. Can you give me some time to digest it? And take pity on me. Taking these home would be even more awkward for me. Maybe you can donate them to the university library. I'll think of it as a contribution to the education system. I'm sorry. None of that, all right? It just makes me feel worse. We're on the same page now, so everything's fine. There was a subtle transformation in Zhao Yunlan's body language as he leaned back. There was no trace of ambiguous flirtatiousness left. With one casual gesture, he'd become a warm, friendly older brother. After harassing you for so long, the least I can do is treat you to a meal. Shun Wei opened his mouth, but Zhao Yunlan gestured for him to stop. He snapped his fingers to summon the waiter, leaving no room for argument. Just go with it. Zhao Yunlan was a master at controlling the mood, turning candor on with the flip of a switch. Shun Wei was uneasy at first, but soon they were chatting about the aftermath of Li Qian's case. By the time they'd finished eating, they seemed like a pair of friendly acquaintances. The excruciating awkwardness from earlier, like a slow-motion car crash, had been washed away. When they went their separate ways, Zhao Yunlan even managed to joke around. You had a little to drink, so I should take you home. But since you're not letting me pursue you, I'll just remind you to call a chauffeur service to get you and your car home. Speaking as a cop, don't drink and drive. And if you're going to drive, don't drink. They're extra strict about it at the end of the year. Don't make me go looking for you at the station. Zhao Yunlan left with a flourish, maintaining his free-spirited image right to the end. It wasn't until he got in his car that he deflated. Frustrated, he ran his fingers roughly through his gelled hair. then smoked 3 cigarettes in a row. He was genuinely a bit upset. He'd been overconfident about landing Shun Way, and learning he was wrong felt like a slap in the face. It was also clear to him now that his feelings for Shun Way were sincere. But falling for someone was no big deal, he reminded himself. In the big city, it could happen 8 times a day. If someone wasn't interested, you backed off. You didn't get clingy or make a scene. That was basic social etiquette. Well, this is a shit show, he said. When the light turned green, Zhao Yunlan stubbed out his cigarette in the car's ashtray. His dinner was sitting hastily in his chest. Between that and the cold wind, he was both uncomfortable and annoyed. When he was a little slow stepping on the gas, the car behind him honked repeatedly. Its horn sounded like a croaking toad. Zhao Yunlan cursed, opened the window, and gave the toad the finger. After that, there were several days when Zhao Yunlan just wasn't in the mood to go out. He went straight home after work each day and lazed around. He had moved out of his parents' home when he was fairly young and bought himself a little apartment, 40 square meters or so, in the heart of the city. It was a classic bachelor existence. He made himself presentable to face the world, but the apartment was a disaster zone. Everything about his home felt frivolous. When the weekend rolled around and Zhao Yunlan had been AWOL from everything but work for a whole week, his friends came and excavated him. They all drank until his soul left his body. Once he dragged himself home, he was out cold until noon the next day. Then it was Sunday. Having no plans, Zhao Yunlan scrounged up half a piece of ancient stale bread and cold water and called that breakfast and lunch. Then he got comfy on his beanbag chair, which he shared with 6 or 7 unmatched socks, and gamed online until well past dinner time. Finally, after it was completely dark out, there was a familiar stab of pain in his stomach. He surfaced from the internet and came back to the real world. There were medications he usually kept at home, but he'd run out. He felt too lazy to move, so he just drank some hot water and decided to push through it. Unfortunately, his stomach had other plans. The cramping got worse and worse until he was drenched in cold sweat, leaving him no choice but to dig out his coat and a pair of pants. Zhao Yunlan yanked them over his pajamas without bothering with socks and ventured out into the world, not remotely presentable. He followed the familiar route to the little restaurant at the entrance to his neighborhood, where he ordered a bowl of century egg and pork congee with a few side dishes. While the side dishes were being made to order, he headed to the nearest supermarket and pharmacy to pick up cigarettes and medication. It was only 800 or 900 meters between the pharmacy and the restaurant. Zhao Yunlan was badly underdressed, and the icy wind kept licking under his sleeves and collar, so he decided to cut through the little back street that got him out of the wind. It took him past a cramped alley with 3 street lamps, only one of which was lit. As he hurried by in the dark, shivering, he suddenly heard voices. A man was cursing, sounding thoroughly drunk. Get out your money! Move! Don't fucking waste my time! The other voice said, Don't blame us. Times are hard. With nice clothes like that, you're obviously rich. It's almost Lunar New Year. I'm sure we all want to stay safe, right? Zhao Yunlan frowned. The New Year was approaching. Dragon City had residents of all stripes, both good and bad. Public security clearly wasn't doing so well if he was running right into a mugging. He narrowed his eyes, counting 3 or 4 thugs, all carrying prohibited knives, surrounding a lone man. A familiar lone man, and not one he wanted to see. Shun Way. What a fucking coincidence. Shun Way was clearly too good-natured. It was one thing to treat friends as warmly as he did, and quite another to react similarly when attacked. He was a fully grown man, yet he didn't resist at all. He didn't even speak a word of protest, just obediently took out his wallet. The thugs exchanged glances, Realizing they had a natural-born victim on their hands, things immediately escalated. Your watch, too! Still, without saying a word, Shun Wei removed his watch. Zhao Yunlan sighed, unable to stand it anymore. Hands shoved into his pockets, he stalked over. His approach was silent and concealed by darkness. A mugger grabbed Shun Wei's watch and shoved him, making him stumble. When his back hit the wall, a red cord peeked out from his collar. "Hey!" one thug said. "What's that thing around your neck?" Another one grabbed Shun Wei's collar, ripping it open. A small pendant was exposed between his collarbones. It was thumbnail-sized and made of a material he'd never seen before. Under the dim streetlight, it glowed in a blinding array of colors. "What kind of gem is that?" The thug couldn't tear his eyes from the pendant. He reached out to grab it. This was a step too far for Shun Wei, who had shown childlike obedience so far. Wrapping his hand around the pendant, he said, "I've given you my money and watch. Don't push your luck." His expression suddenly darkened, like a dough figurine coming to life. The thug gripping his collar belatedly realized that the eyes looking back at him were a bottomless black, glowing with a cold light. That gaze inexplicably struck fear into them, and the thug found himself letting go. Seeing that, his companion raised a hand and aimed for Shun Wei's head. Experience told him this was the best way to deal with people who wore glasses. An unexpected blow to the head, followed by a kick in the gut after their glasses flew off. This plan was derailed when someone planted a fierce kick on his back before he could even swing at Shun Wei. Pain flared in the thug's chest, nearly making him cough up blood. He flailed forward. Shun Wei twisted to the side to avoid him, and the thug smacked into the wall like a pancake, limbs askew. Stunned, Shun Wei looked up to see Zhao Yunlan only 3 steps away, face pale from the cold. Zhao Yunlan shivered, blowing on his hands to warm them. "You guys sure have a lot of spare time if you're pulling this on such a cold night." His kick had been powerful enough to send the man reeling. The thugs were briefly shocked into silence, but one finally opened his mouth. Who are you? I'm warning you, mind your own business." Zhao Yunlan tilted his head, neck cracking. An icy smile spread across his face, revealing his dimples. 5 minutes later, he was on the phone with the nearest police station, telling them to hurry up and collect the purse. After hanging up, he nudged a fallen thug with his toe. "I was hustling while you were still in diapers. Make sure you know whose territory you're in next time, okay?" The thug he was stepping on screamed pitifully. "Ayo! Daga, we, ah!" "Who the fuck are you calling Daga?" Zhao Yunlan kicked him again. "You sure do know how to take an opportunity to save yourself, huh? Take off your belt. Hurry up." He bound the lot of them to a street lamp with the ease of long experience, then retrieved Shun Wei's wallet and watch. Handing them back, he asked, "Are you okay?" Shun Wei dusted himself off elegantly as he took his things. "Thanks." Of its own volition, Zhao Yunlan's gaze came to rest on Shun Wei's pendant. It was a hollow crystal sphere, illuminated by something inside. It might have been made from some sort of fluorescent material. Zhao Yunlan had never seen such a warm, unique light. He almost felt as if the sphere contained a living flame. For no reason he could discern, his heart flooded with familiarity and fondness. It wasn't until Shun Wei covered it with a hand that Zhao Yunlan realized he'd been staring for far too long. He quickly looked away. "What a coincidence this all is," he said lightly. "If someone didn't know better, you'd think I planned this myself." Shun Wei shot him a confused look, not getting the joke. Zhao Yunlan spread his hands wide. "So I could be the knight in shining armor saving the damsel in distress to make sure you remember I exist?" Shun Wei burst out laughing, then looked at the thugs Zhao Yunlan had strung up like kebabs. "They have it hard too. If I don't teach them a lesson, they'll think they can go around biting anyone. Don't worry about them. There isn't that much space in lockup, so they won't be in there long." He turned to the thugs. "Don't let me see you guys again. You'll be in trouble if I do. You hear me?" Having put the fear of God into them, Zhao Yunlan turned and let his arm hover near Shun Wei's shoulder, politely avoiding contact. "I'll walk you home. Do you live in the area too? How come I've never seen you around before?" Shun Wei's eyes shadowed. Quietly, he said, "In a city this large, two people could live in the same neighborhood and never meet. That's what it means to not share fate, I suppose." As he spoke, Shun Wei fell half a step behind. Out of Zhao Yunlan's line of sight, something unnatural entered his gaze. Behind his glasses, his eyes were dark and incomprehensible. He stared at Zhao Yunlan's back in a way that was almost yearning, hinting at greed held barely in check. But all he said was, "This area has always been quite safe. What happened was a rare occurrence. There's no need for you to walk me home on such a cold night, Officer Zhao." Zhao Yunlan didn't insist. He just led him out of the dark alleyway to where the street lamps offered more light. Here and there, they were passed by a car or pedestrian rushing home late in the night. In the distance, there was the occasional flash of a neon light in the business district. With a wave, Zhao Yunlan said, "Okay, the areas ahead are less sketchy, so I won't escort you. Get home safely." Shun Wei held his briefcase and nodded in farewell, maintaining a polite distance. "Thanks." The two of them parted ways at the intersection, heading in different directions like two lines that would never meet. In older times, people had lived in small, bleak villages or within city walls where everyone knew everyone else. But now, it took 100 years of good karma to persuade fate to bring two people together for even a moment. In the modern world, millions upon millions of people inhabited the same city without ever making contact. Fate, it seemed, had appreciated over time. Shun Wei headed down his own path for a bit, his expression cold. At the corner, he couldn't resist a final glance back. With the start, he realized that Zhao Yunlan hadn't left. Instead, he was doubled over, one hand resting on the wall while the other clutched the left side of his abdomen. Chapter 15. The pain in Zhao Yunlan's gut came in waves. Maybe he'd overdone it while coming to a certain beauty's rescue. Or maybe he'd just been out breathing the frigid air too long. But whatever the reason, this flare-up felt like someone had taken a blender to his innards. His hands and feet felt like blocks of ice, and his vision was fading in and out. He was starting to suspect he'd have to resort to calling 120 for emergency help when suddenly someone's hands were steadying him. A panicked voice by his ear demanded, "What's wrong?" "Shun Wei?" Cold sweat beaded on Zhao Yunlan's temples. He couldn't speak, but heard Shun Wei saying, "I'm taking you to the hospital." Zhao Yunlan grunted and slid down to the ground, unwilling to move. Once the wave of pain passed, he gave his jacket pocket a weak pat. "It's fine. I have medicine." "Absolutely not." Zhao Yunlan finally managed to catch a breath. Where was all this energy when he was getting mugged? "It's a chronic condition," he explained evenly. "It won't kill me, and there's no quick fix. If I go to the hospital, they'll just put me through an endoscopy and a biopsy. And once they're done torturing me, they'll prescribe the same kinds of medication I already have and give a speech about healthier habits. Trust me, I know. I've gotten the royal treatment there plenty of times. Just help me up. Thanks." He made it back to his feet with Shun Wei's help, wrapped his coat more tightly around himself, and started toward the little restaurant to pick up his food. Shun Wei's brow furrowed. "Where are you going in this condition?" "To get the takeout I just..." Zhao Yunlan paused, then finished. "Ordered." "How did you know I don't live in this direction?" Shun Wei startled. Under the ghostly white streetlight, there was so little color in his cheeks that he could have been sculpted from snow. Zhao Yunlan seemed to have realized something. A disbelieving look flashed across his sweat-drenched face. The air between them was suddenly charged. After a solid half a minute, Shun Wei said stiffly, I didn't think anyone lived in that direction. He said this while pointing directly toward not one, but three long-established residential neighborhoods. So many people lived in that direction, in fact, that it was one of the most notorious areas in Dragon City for traffic jams. Zhao Yunlan's response was even stiffer. I see. Let me take you home, Shun Wei said. Call the restaurant and have them pack everything up. I'll pick it up for you later. Actually, Zhao Yunlan began, but Shun Wei interrupted. Stop dallying. Aren't you cold? The walk home was an adventure in awkwardness. Shun Wei was clearly distracted while Zhao Yunlan was ill at ease. Neither of them was feeling talkative. Mercifully, it was only several hundred meters or a couple thousand steps to their destination. Shun Wei took down the restaurant's address and phone number, then told Zhao Yunlan to head upstairs. It wasn't until Shun Wei had almost turned and left that Zhao Yunlan finally called out helpfully. I live on the 9th floor, by the way. Shun Wei's back went ramrod stiff. Accidentally making it worse, he added, Apartment 902. First door on the left when you get off the elevator. Shun Wei straight up fled. Zhao Yunlan watched Shun Wei disappear into the night, then dragged himself to his apartment, practically at a crawl. Once inside, he sat on the bench in his entryway. He didn't turn on the lights or pour himself a glass of water. He just lit a cigarette. Okay. Its orange glow flickered between his fingers. The very first time they'd met, Shun Wei had avoided his gaze aggressively enough to seem suspicious. Then on the rooftop, Shun Wei had pulled him back up with incredible care. From then on, no matter how hard he'd tried to get close to Shun Wei, he'd been met with avoidance and finally a face-to-face rejection. Calmer now, Zhao Yunlan mentally reviewed that scene in the restaurant. Had Shun Wei seemed to find it awkward? No. It had seemed much more like the rejection had hurt him. And now it turned out Shun Wei knew where he lived. What does this mean? Zhao Yunlan thought. Did he investigate me at some point? Or stalk me? The what of the situation was unimportant. Zhao Yunlan's address wasn't a national secret. Anyone who wanted to find it out would be able to. But why did Shun Wei do it at all? Had he been so afraid Zhao Yunlan would do something indecent that he'd wanted to find Zhao Yunlan's home base before calling back up to deal with him? Or... He was still smoking and rolling the question around in his muddled mind for the 300th time when the doorbell rang. He startled, as though someone had struck his heart with a riding crop and made it break into a full gallop. That in turn made his temples throb painfully. His hands reacted faster than his brain and pulled the door open. Only then did he realize that his limbs were numb from sitting for so long, and worse, he hadn't had a chance to clean up his pigsty of a home. It wasn't remotely fit for guests, but it was too late for regret. You... Shun Wei began, just as Zhao Yunlan said, They opened and closed their mouths at the same time. Then, while they were staring at each other, the floor shook beneath them. The entryways hanging like swung dramatically, and a black cat figurine fell off the edge of the shoe cabinet. Only Zhao Yunlan's fast reflexes saved it. An earthquake? He asked. Dragon City was on a flat plain, nowhere near volcanoes or regular seismic activity. Most of its residents likely didn't even know the most basic steps for disaster preparedness. The building's hallway stayed quiet. No one even poked their head out to take a look. The shaking lasted for what felt like an unusually long time. It wasn't terribly strong, but it seemed to go on forever. An unspeakable feeling welled up in Zhao Yunlan's chest, the sensation of jerking awake after stumbling in a midnight dream, heart skipping a beat. Something had resurfaced into the world. Zhao Yunlan's ears buzzed. He unthinkingly took a step forward, as though drawn by something. Shun Wei threw an arm across the doorway to stop him. Zhao Yunlan came back to himself with a start and met Shun Wei's gaze, which was heavy with a biting cold light to it. He was a completely different person from the scholar who'd obediently handed his wallet over to muggers. The shaking stopped. Shun Wei said, "Be careful." Zhao Yunlan eyed him suspiciously, and Shun Wei's ears flushed bright red. He avoided Zhao Yunlan's gaze stiffly. The intent in Shun Wei's eyes a moment before might have been a trick of the light. "I," said Shun Wei, as Zhao Yunlan said, "Please come in." They spoke over each other again. Enough things had happened that day that Shun Wei seemed resigned to his fate. After only a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Zhao Yunlan hadn't turned on the lights, so he tripped over an open umbrella at the door. Winter rain was unusual in Dragon City. It must have been at least a month since the last rainfall. An owner who hadn't put it away was lazy enough that you might find mushrooms growing on him. Once the light was on, a second glance revealed a bag of laundry from the laundromat up on top of the shoe cabinet. The tag on it was 2 days old, and the bag hadn't even been opened, probably because Zhao Yunlan hadn't yet needed any of these particular clothes. Shun Wei scanned the room without comment. There was a shirt, a pair of pants, and a knit vest on the sofa. The bed was covered with a variety of books, with a laptop in sleep mode under them. All in all, it was a masterpiece of mess with barely any clear space to set foot. Zhao Yunlan apologized quickly, casually unearthing a spot on the sofa to sit. Before he could straighten up, a fresh wave of pain started in his belly. "Don't worry about all of that." Shun Wei set the takeout on the coffee table, sighed, then began moving the books on the bed. "Where do you normally put all this?" "On the bed during the day, then on the floor at night." The heck? Okay. After a brief pause of stunned silence, Shun Wei quickly sorted the books into 2 piles, after which he freed up some space on the equally disastrous desk and put the books there. Finally, he moved the computer to the nightstand. "Now lie down. I'll go pour you some water." "Where is your water?" Zhao Yunlan, who had curled up like a shrimp, pointed to a little water dispenser in the kitchen. Despite his obvious misery, he was still tightly bundled up in his coat as if ready to enter a beauty pageant for the sick. Exasperated, Shun Wei said, "Take off your jacket when you lie down. Aren't you uncomfortable?" "I'm afraid you'll think I'm a pervert if I take it off." The visible layer of cold sweat on Zhao Yunlan's forehead, despite it being the dead of winter, betrayed how much pain he was in, but he was still a total smartass. Shun Wei's expression darkened. "Enough nonsense. Hurry up." Zhao Yunlan peeled off his jacket and pants with no further hesitation, leaving him lounging casually in front of Shun Wei in pajamas that revealed most of his chest and chiseled abs. Shun Wei's face changed color as if it had been boiled. Unabashed, Zhao Yunlan said, "You're the one who told me to strip." "He told you to take off your jacket." "I mean your coat." "Okay." Shun Wei looked away immediately. He put the pillow at the head of the bed and spread out the crumpled heap of blankets, eyes down all the while. "Give me your cup and I'll go get... Zhao Yunlan, where are your socks?" Zhao Yunlan had taken off his shoes, revealing bare feet that were blue with cold. "I just stepped out for a minute to get medication," he said matter-of-factly. "Wearing socks would mean I'd have to wash them." Any further explanation was cut off when Shun Wei bent down and grabbed hold of Zhao Yunlan's feet. Shun Wei's hands were always cold, but they were warm in comparison. Shocked, Zhao Yunlan instinctively tried to pull his feet back, but Shun Wei's grip was too firm. Strong fingers began massaging his pressure points. "Stop!" Zhao Yunlan yelped. "Stop! Stop! I haven't even washed my feet today! Ah!" Face serious, Shun Wei said, "Your tea and blood are stagnant and you live in complete chaos. That's why you have stomach problems. You..." Suddenly realizing his tone was too familiar, Shun Wei dropped his gaze and shut up. Zhao Yunlan's feet were practically numb from Shun Wei's massage, but wailing the way he wanted to would probably ruin his image. His lips went white from holding it in. After a while, though, his feet miraculously began to feel a bit warmer. Shun Wei finally released them and tucked them into his blankets. Shun Wei went and washed his hands, brought over Zhao Yunlan's medicine and some hot water, and watched as he swallowed it. Shameless. Barely began to describe Zhao Yunlan's pajamas. The top was only barely buttoned, lying open all the way to the bottom of his ribcage. When he pressed against his left side, the pajama top slipped even further and showed off his abs. Shun Wei didn't dare look up. To keep himself busy, he started opening the food, taking it to the kitchen to heat up. The curtains of the apartment were all drawn. The garbage was essentially empty, with nothing inside but some torn-up bread packaging with an expiry date a week in the past. The fridge, upon investigation, was just as empty. There was only half a bag of cat food. Every pot and pan, piece of equipment, and appliance was brand new. Some even still had their tags. Not a single cockroach could have survived in that pristine kitchen. It was practically a showroom model. "You didn't go out at all today," Shun Wei said. "What did you eat?" Zhao Yunlan pointed at the discarded bread packaging. "For a whole day. What about yesterday?" "I got blackout drunk yesterday," said Zhao Yunlan, pressing his temples. "I don't remember." Shun Wei wordlessly assessed the takeout. It appeared Zhao Yunlan had learned a few things from being sick so often. All the food he'd ordered was easy to digest and unlikely to cause further stomach problems. Shun Wei heated it all up, then prepared to leave. At the door, he hesitated, then asked, "Officer Zhao, you aren't getting any younger. You have a successful career. Aren't you going to consider finding someone to take care of you?" Zhao Yunlan spread his hands. "I considered you, but you declined." "Well, dang." Okay. Shun Wei's hands twitched nervously. He tucked them behind himself, where they curled into fists. "Stop joking. You get some rest." Having said that, he made his escape. Shun Wei seemed to be at the heart of a huge puzzle. After carelessly eating his fill, Zhao Yunlan took his laptop from the nightstand and logged into the public security internal system to search for Shun Wei's file. The file turned out to be both thorough and matter-of-fact. Shun Wei's entire life was the very picture of young and accomplished. He'd attended a prestigious university where he'd completed his doctorate. After graduating, he was hired by his alma mater. He was unmarried. His father had passed away after an illness, and his mother had moved overseas after retiring. There was nothing remotely unusual about him. By the time Zhao Yunlan abandoned his research, it was nearly midnight. The streets were quiet. Most of the neighborhood's lights had gone dark, and there was almost no sound of traffic. The occasional light that reached the windows was blocked by the tightly shut curtains. At the moment when the hour hand and minute hand aligned, a sudden sound came from Zhao Yunlan's clarity. It was followed at once by the noise of a Daqing woodblock signaling deep night. It grew closer and closer, louder and louder. Footnote 28. Daqing is a traditional method for time-telling at night. A night watchman would walk around town with a gong or a wood block, striking 5 times throughout the night, roughly once every 24 hours. Back to the reading. There came the sound of a man's voice, sometimes closer and sometimes farther away. He dragged out his words as he spoke. "Reapers are leading the way. All living souls stay away." Zhao Yunlan's curtains, which hadn't been opened for an entire day, parted of their own accord to reveal frost-covered glass. Faint white light radiated through the gap, waiting quietly outside. Zhao Yunlan tugged the wide-open collar of his pajamas closed and threw on a jacket. "Come in." As soon as he spoke, the window latch opened with a click. Piercing cold wind rushed in. blanketing Zhao Yunlan's exposed skin with goosebumps. Something like a person, carrying a white paper lantern, was right outside his window, his 9th floor window. The person, also made of paper, was the height of a human and had a pair of dull, drawn-on eyes. Their huge, bloody mouth opened almost from ear to ear. They could have competed in a beauty pageant with 4 Bright Avenue's very own Lao Wu. Zhao Yunlan was unfazed. He took out a little ceramic pot, spirit money, and incense from the bottom drawer of his bedside table, as though he had done it many times. He stuck the incense into the pot's opening, lit the money, and finally nodded in greeting. A small token of my respect. The paper reaper's huge mouth moved stiffly, forming a semblance of a polite smile. Most humans in the mortal realm who could communicate with the dead had their sights set too high to pay attention to the little reapers of the netherworld. This guardian was more courteous than anyone else. Even if important, serious business slipped his mind, he never forgot these small formalities. "Did Lord Reaper need something, coming this late at night?" Zhao Yunlan asked. The paper reaper bowed, hands clasped, then politely said, "The Yanluo kings were enraged by the Hunger Ghost's recent escape. They were ordered to thoroughly investigate the 3 realms. One by one, we inspected and verified all the living, the dead, and the souls waiting for their sentence, recorded it all, and incorporated it in the Book of Life and Death. Footnote 29, the Book of Life and Death is a book that keeps records of all living beings, how long they live, all the details of their current life, so the netherworld can keep track of all the souls. This is how the Reapers know it's time to collect a soul from the mortal realm." Continuing with the reading. "This lowly one has been sent by the 10 Yanluo kings to bring a copy to the Guardians so that you might have something to refer to while upholding the law in the mortal realm." While speaking, the paper reaper brought out a black leather notebook and held it out to Zhao Yunlan with both hands. It looked like an ordinary notebook bound in soft cowhide, but once in his hands, it was extraordinarily light. Zhao Yunlan hefted it, gave it a small pinch, then sniffed the pages. "Fusang paper and Hailong ink, the Book of Life and Death, and the Record of Merits. One can learn anything about a person from before their life until after their death, either by using an invocation talisman with their name and birth chart written on it, or by burning a soul-tracking talisman wrapped around a strand of hair and letting the ashes melt into the book. Is that right?" The paper reaper hastily said, "The guardian is knowledgeable and has a good eye." No, I've seen this in an ancient text. In fact, I've suggested it to the netherworld many times." Zhao Yunlan casually flipped through the notebook in his hand, faking a smile. "But nothing ever came of it, so I thought the material might be hard to find or that the lords might have some other plans." That was always the way of things with the current 10 Yanluo kings. The bureaucracy was even more impenetrable than that of the mortal realm. If there was nothing in it for them, they wouldn't rouse themselves to action. If anything happened, they'd drag things out. It was incredibly annoying. The Soul Guarding Order and the Netherworld had bumped heads many times over the years, putting Zhao Yunlan in a constant tug-of-war with them while having to simultaneously work with them. All that experience told him that the other world must be up to no good if they were suddenly being generous for no reason. The paper reaper answered agreeably, pretending not to take his meaning. Zhao Yunlan gave them a piercing glance. Just then, a thin piece of paper fell from the book. "An arrest warrant?" The blank piece of rice paper changed the instant it came in contact with his hand. Black mist materialized on it, and then a face appeared within the mist. The face belonged to something like a human, but the head was large and hairless. Its back was hunched and its neck scrunched, and the face was full of warts. It was the creature the soul-executing emissary had cut down on that rooftop while investigating the reincarnation dial. So that was the real point of the visit. Face carefully blank, Zhao Yunlan asked, "What exactly am I looking at?" The Reaper rushed to answer, reciting obviously well-worn words. "This being is similar to a human, but not a human. It is called Yo-chu and was born from the chaos. It can speak the human tongue, but its disposition is violent and savage. It eats people and drinks souls for pleasure, and fears light and fire. Should the guardian encounter it, you may kill it on sight, but please take extra care." Yo-chu. The Reaper kept talking, with repeated emphasis on how to kill a Yo-chu when you encountered one, but almost completely glossed over the creature's origin. Zhao Yunlan was forced to interrupt. "Hold on. Where did you just say they come from?" Politely, the Paper Reaper repeated, "They are born from the chaos." They might as well have said nothing. In Chinese mythology, chaos described the state of the world before Pangu split the sky from the ground, when the heavens, earth, time, and space were muddled together in one mass. By that logic, the heavens, the earth, and people were also born from the chaos. Any monster with mysterious origins could be explained by "born from the chaos." Somehow, the description, similar to a human but not human, struck Zhao Yunlan as very interesting. "How come I've never heard of them before? Does it have anything to do with the Great Seal that the soul-executing emissary mentioned?" "Evil is always one step ahead of good. These filthy things are endless." It was clear that the Paper Reaper had frozen for a moment. Rather than answering the question, they were avoiding the topic. They lowered their head hastily. "This lowly one will take their leave." As the Reaper finished speaking, the white paper lantern flickered a few times. Both the lantern and Reaper vanished. The cold wind immediately disappeared too. The curtains and windows closed themselves, and warm air soon filled the room. If it hadn't been for the black leather-bound notebook in Zhao Yunlan's hands and the little pot filled with ashes, everything might have been his imagination. The soul-executing emissary, the 4 hollowed artifacts, Yo-chu, the netherworld's evasiveness. Zhao Yunlan lay face up on his bed. By now his blankets were no longer warm, and he was once again covered in goosebumps. He found he couldn't fall asleep. As the night deepened, so did his thoughts. Between the encounter with the Paper Reaper and his physical discomfort, he tossed and turned all night and didn't sleep a wink. So when the doorbell rang bright and early at 7 o'clock, Zhao Yunlan felt like his eyelids had been completely glued together. He crawled out of bed, so heavy-headed that it threw him off balance. His vision was dim, so he sat back down on the bed with great difficulty. His joints cracked and he ached all over. By the time he'd slowly made his way to the door, Zhao Yunlan had mentally skinned and slaughtered whoever was on the other side. It's probably Shun Way. Not to put too fine a point on it, but he was something of a mad dog. And then he opened the door, only to find himself face to face with Shun Way, who was holding several large bags. Zhao Yunlan froze for a few seconds while he tried to react. He immediately attempted to retract his man-eating expression and replace it with one more appropriate for welcoming the arrival of spring. Unfortunately, he was still muddled enough that everything was just a bit off. His features jammed, stuck between man-eating and spring has sprung. If one had to describe it, they might say it bore an uncanny likeness to the Nian monster. Oh, I know this monster. But anyway, there's a footnote 30. Nian, which means year, by the way, is a monster in Chinese mythology. Every year, in order to scare it away, people wore red and set off fireworks, which is why the Chinese word for year is Nian. Chapter 16. Seeing that Zhao Yunlan didn't look so good, Shun Wei freed up a hand to touch his forehead. "You're a bit feverish. What are you still standing for? Go back to bed and get under the blankets." Zhao Yunlan, dizzy, found himself being pushed into the bedroom. Then Shun Wei grabbed his wrist. Zhao Yunlan was caught off guard and instinctively tried to pull free, but couldn't break Shun Wei's grip. It was the second time that it happened. The first time had been on that roof at Dragon City University when Shun Wei had dragged him back up with only the strength of his arms. Shun Wei didn't have the weak hands of an academic. Instead, they were icy cold and frighteningly strong, calloused between the thumb and point finger. Not the kind of calluses that resulted from too much time using a mouse. Having been a bit out of it from the fever, being startled had made Zhao Yunlan break out in a fresh layer of cold sweat. He was much more awake now. Shun Wei, however, didn't make any more unusual moves. He just checked Zhao Yunlan's pulse with the air of someone who knew what he was doing, then put warm water and medications for fever and stomach problems on the bedside table. Drink some water and take the stomach medicine. Then rest. Don't mind me. I'll make you some food, and you can take the rest of the medicine after eating. Zhao Yunlan absorbed this in silence. What kind of shoddy East meets West doctor prescribed Western medication after just feeling his pulse? But everything Shun Wei had brought was common over-the-counter medication. Zhao Yunlan was well acquainted with them from being sick so often. A quick glance at the labels was enough for him to decide that taking the meds wouldn't kill him. He washed them down decisively with water. Shun Wei took some time to put away everything he'd brought with him. Then, once Zhao Yunlan's empty fridge was more than half full, he took out a little clay pot, washed it, and prepared his ingredients. Once he'd mixed it all together and brought it to a boil, he lowered the heat so the food could simmer. Finally, he washed his hands and warmed them on the radiator. Zhao Yunlan's lips were a little dry, possibly because he was unwell and had slept poorly. Some of his hair was stuck in the pillow, while some fell around his temples. It was softer than Shun Wei had imagined, giving Zhao Yunlan a tender air. Shun Wei's gaze slowly traced over the corners of his eyes and the lines of his brows, entranced. He was jolted out of his reverie by the sound of the pot boiling. He quickly looked down and removed the lid, not realizing that Zhao Yunlan's eyes had opened. "Shun Wei, you—" The unexpected sound of Zhao Yunlan's voice nearly made Shun Wei drop the lid on the stovetop. Zhao Yunlan's tone went stiff. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you." "You're sick, and there's no one to take care of you," Shun Wei said. The unprompted explanation didn't make things any less awkward. "Since we ran into each other, I thought I should at least come check on you, especially after you saved me yesterday." "So you're here to repay me?" After a pause, Shun Wei said, with some difficulty, "It's what friends should do." Zhao Yunlan let himself thoroughly savor those 5 words. Whatever he tasted on them made him chuckle for some reason, leaving Shun Wei too nervous to do anything other than watch the pot on the stove. It wasn't until Zhao Yunlan had been quiet for a while that Shun Wei finally mustered up the courage to take another look. Zhao Yunlan, it turned out, had fallen asleep, perhaps because he was sick and exhausted, and possibly with an extra nudge from the medication. Shun Wei exhaled silently and went to the bedside. Zhao Yunlan's head was slightly tilted, and the shadows cast by his lashes gave the impression of even deeper sleep. Shun Wei reached out and caressed his face, then carefully eased him down to lie flat on the bed. There was something like piety on Shun Wei's gaze now. He clasped his hands tightly, as if to preserve the trace of Zhao Yunlan's body heat on his palms. After a while, he smiled self-depreciatingly, then bent down and picked up a coat Zhao Yunlan had tossed aside. That was when he saw an unusual ceramic pot on the floor. There was a layer of brown ash lining the bottom of it. Shun Wei pinched a bit of the ash and rubbed it between his fingers. The ash that fell from his skin turned white, as if the spirit of the wood had been sucked away. "A reaper?" Shun Wei adjusted his glasses, looking at the tightly drawn curtains. Zhao Yunlan hadn't expected to fall asleep, but a deep slumber crept over him. When his eyes finally opened, sunlight was already piercing his curtains. He was sweaty all over, and the blanket pressed stickily against him. It wasn't at all comfortable. He even felt a little dizzy. Eventually, his nose registered the unfamiliar scent of food. He looked up and saw Shun Wei sitting nearby on the sofa, quietly leafing through an old book of supernatural folk tales. Fully absorbed in the book, Shun Wei was lovelier than words could describe. His face was like a painting given life. Hearing Zhao Yunlan stir, Shun Wei looked up with a smile. "You're awake. Do you feel better?" Awake was a bit of an overstatement. Zhao Yunlan nodded, still in a daze. Shun Wei reached out and felt his forehead. "Your fever's gone. Does your stomach still hurt?" As he shook his head, Zhao Yunlan noticed that all the clothes he'd left scattered about were now folded and in a neat pile on the bedside table. He touched them experimentally and found them warm, as if Shun Wei had even heated them on the radiator. It felt unexpectedly comfortable. "I figured you'd wake up soon," said Shun Wei. "I turned on the warming fan in the bathroom. You'll feel even better once you've washed off all that sweat. I've cooked a few simple things for you to eat." He sighed. "You should take better care of yourself." In an unexpected development, Zhao Yunlan felt a little embarrassed. Hugging his clothes to his chest, he got up and headed for the bathroom without a word. Zhao Yunlan had moved out too young. His lifestyle was one of going out and rushing to social events or casually calling for takeout. He couldn't remember the last time he'd woken up to the smell of home cooking and the sound of someone urging him to go wash up. Once he'd showered and come back out in fresh clothes, he realized, dumbfounded, that his doghouse of an apartment had been cleaned within an inch of its life. His curtains were open, letting in the light, and it seemed like the windows had been opened at some point to let in fresh air. The temperature was a bit cool as a result, but the air was crisp and clean. Shun Wei was just fishing the bamboo chopsticks that Zhao Yunlan had never even touched out of the boiling water. He gave them a rinse in cool water and put them in the chopstick holder. Then he opened the small clay pot and tasted the contents with a little spoon. A rich fragrance wafted out. For a moment, it was as if Zhao Yunlan's pounding heart had taken wing. Shun Wei turned off the heat and carried two simple home-cooked dishes from the kitchen. Zhao Yunlan moved as if to take them from him, but instead of taking hold of the food, he grabbed Shun Wei's hand. Even holding hot plates, Shun Wei's hands were abnormally cold. Zhao Yunlan couldn't help pressing his own hands even more tightly around them. Shun Wei shivered fiercely and tried to pull away. Shun Wei started. "Do you really not like me?" Zhao Yunlan pressed himself close and set the food aside, keeping Shun Wei from running away. "Shun Wei, look at me. Look right at me and say it again. Tell me you don't like me." When Shun Wei abruptly looked up, the usual gentleness in his eyes was gone. Backed into a corner, he spoke almost harshly. "A man's role is to marry a wife and have children. You're still so young. You shouldn't go against the natural order of things and human nature. It's absurd." Oh. Zhao Yunlan was floored by this serious accusation. "Why are we suddenly escalating to the natural order of things and human nature?" Shun Wei pulled his hand free. "How will you explain to your parents one day that you're always getting tangled up with men? If your family line ends with you, when you enter the autumn of your life, who will care for you in your old age?" Incredulous, Zhao Yunlan asked, "Explain what to whom? When I'm old, I'll take my pension and live in a retirement home. It's not my job to keep the human race from going extinct, Shen Laosher. Are you a closeted homophobe? Wake up! We're not in Qing dynasty anymore." Shun Wei only stared back at him. Zhao Yunlan studied him, unable to believe that someone so beautiful, such a joy for the eyes and mind alike, was such a pedantic old scholar at heart. Just because someone's straight doesn't mean they'll find a suitable partner. Getting married doesn't guarantee being able to have a child. Having a kid doesn't mean they'll make it to adulthood. And if they do, you have no way of knowing what they'll be like when they grow up. Where's the sense in taking such a huge gamble? investing in such a high-risk product just so it can bring honor upon your family and take care of you in old age. You're better off buying a lottery ticket. If you really like kids, you can sponsor a few needy children. Then, during the holidays, there will be someone willing to come to you. Shun Wei had nothing to say to his preposterous reasoning. His expression was wooden. We're all human, Zhao Yunlan continued. When we're in pain, we have to think carefully to keep from repeating the same mistakes. But when we're happy, we need to think less, not risk ruining our joy by overthinking things. Imagine if the world was ending and everyone became zombies. Imagine how you'd feel as you closed your eyes for the last time and realized you'd never let yourself have what you really wanted. How much would that suck? Very low, Shun Wei said, there aren't many times when a person can freely give into their desires. Exactly. Zhao Yunlan spread his hands. Other people will deny you things. Are you going to deny yourself things too? What's the point of living then? Why not just die and get it over with? Don't speak nonsense. Confident now, Zhao Yunlan said, so you do like me. Shen Wei turned to leave, and Zhao Yunlan wasn't able to keep a grip on him. Shun Wei, what's the point of running? Sure, you can run for what I'm saying, but can you run away from your heart? His words chased Shun Wei like wild beasts. If he could have, Shun Wei would have thrown a smoke bomb and flung himself to the ground. As soon as Shun Wei was gone, Zhao Yunlan moved to the window to wait. About 3 minutes later, he saw Shun Wei hurry out of the building. Not afraid of the cold, Zhao Yunlan pushed open the window and leaned halfway out. He was suddenly certain that Shun Wei would turn back to look at him. No sooner did he have that thought than Shun Wei glanced up at his window, caught red-handed. Zhao Yunlan shaped his hands into a heart and aimed it toward the man below. Hundreds of flowers of the heart, in full bloom, erupted from the corners of his pale lips. They rained down on Shun Wei, battering him. Zhao Yunlan stayed there until Shun Wei was out of sight. Then he appreciatively ate his steaming hot food, comforted in heart and stomach. We have plenty of time, he thought confidently. You can't run. Chapter 17. On Monday morning, the smell of breakfast filled the office. Zhu Hong had bought 3 pounds of buns from the cafeteria, their delicate skins nearly bursting with filling. The aroma could have lured people from 2 miles away. Everyone who had missed breakfast after waking up late followed their noses over, even the elusive Director Zhao. Shun Wei urging him to stop smoking, drinking, and eating greasy food was a distant memory. Zhao Yunlan scarfed down a bun in 2 bites, then rapped Changcheng on the head with an oily paw. Kid, go turn on the news. Changcheng obediently darted off. Watching him go, Zhu Hong said smugly, Xiao Guo's a good kid who's thoughtful and works hard. He's just a little too nervous. He doesn't dare eat food from anyone but me. That makes sense, Zhao Yunlan said. He's scared of humans. Zhu Hong started to nod and then realized what he was implying. Just to be absolutely sure she understood, Zhao Yunlan kindly added, He's not afraid of you because he doesn't see you as human. Zhu Hong had no reply for that. Just then, she saw Dah-ching climb stealthily up onto the desk. Dah-ching watched carefully, and at the very moment Zhao Yunlan was about to gobble up another one, he delivered one speedy, perfect aimed smack, sending the filling flying out of Zhao Yunlan's bun. Dah-ching caught the filling in mid-air, then flipped backward 360 degrees and landed on the floor. The entire sequence of movements was as smooth and natural as passing clouds and flowing water. You could almost forget his massive bulk. Then Dah-ching strolled off, butt swaying and tail upright. Zhao Yunlan was left gaping and holding the empty bun skin, dripping with oil. Damn cat! You deserved that, Zhu Hong said. The TV morning news was talking about the earthquake that had happened Saturday evening. The office quieted. The earthquake's epicenter had been in a sparsely populated mountain region. Not much had been affected. As of yet, there was no reported property damage or loss of lives. Stuffing the bun skin into his mouth, Zhao Yunlan casually said, "The earthquake 2 days ago, right? The city sure shook. It must have been at least a level 4. When no one responded, he looked around and found everyone giving him strange looks. "What?" he said. "Boss, are you still half asleep?" Zhu Hong asked. "The epicenter was in the northwest, and it was a level 5. It was way too far from Dragon City for you to have felt anything." Zhao Yunlan paid closer attention to the news report and realized she was right. It had been a small earthquake, half the width of China away from them. Then maybe something else caused the shake I felt? It was around 9 p.m. on Saturday and really strong. None of you felt it? I guess you all live on lower floors. I'm on the 9th floor. "I live on the 16th floor," said Jing. "I was still awake at 9 and didn't feel a thing." Zhu Hong said, "I'm on the 12th floor. Gwoh-uh, did you feel anything?" Before Changcheng could respond, Chu Shujer glanced up. "Wang, he said, surprised. "Why are you out during the day?" Zhu Hong jumped up. "Close the curtains! She can't come into contact with sunlight!" Changcheng and Jing rushed to draw the curtains, tripping over each other. The office was suddenly so dark that it could have been dawn or dusk. After finishing his buns, Daqing hurled himself at the wall and kicked the light switch on. Wang's complexion was pale to the point of transparent. She only dared float in once every sliver of sunlight had been blocked out. Curled up in a chair, she looked like she was on the verge of dissipating. Jing grabbed incense from his drawer, lit it, and held it under her nose. "Hurry, breathe some of the smoke." Once half of the incense had burned, she finally recovered a little. She exhaled lightly, looking a bit more substantial and less like a phantom shadow. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Zhao Yunlan smacked her on the forehead, girl or not. He actually made contact. The smack pushed her head back. "Are you tired of living or something? If so, I'll book you in at a tanning salon to give you a beautiful glow." Changcheng had never seen his boss angry like this. He shivered in fright. With some difficulty, Wang raised an arm and pointed at the TV. The news report was now showing the rescue team and a reporter in the mountain village near the epicenter of the quake. They were taking stock of the situation. The earthquake had been centered in the northwest. The roads in that area were very poor and few people lived there. The screen showed a handful of scattered dirt houses. It was unclear if they were inhabited, but they all looked intact. The earthquake really hadn't been very serious. At the village's entrance was an old, worn stone tablet that read, "Qingxi Village." There was a certain mistiness to Wang gaze that always made her seem a little out of it, as if she couldn't focus very well. Through that mist, her eyes were fixed on that stone tablet. It wasn't until the camera panned away that she whispered, "That's where where her home is?" thought Changcheng. "That's where my bones are buried." Her declaration sent a small, chilly breeze through the office. "Director Zhao, I want to ask for some time off," she continued in her unique wispy voice. "I want to be laid to rest." Zhao Yunlan's brow creased. He took out a cigarette. Wang leaned back. Flatly, she said, "Keep your secondhand smoke away from me." "You're a ghost. What does it matter to you?" "Ghosts can still smell cigarette smoke. At this rate, sooner or later, you'll become a human mosquito coil." Zhao Yunlan stuffed his lighter back into his pocket unhappily. "Your name is already in the soul guarding order. You're never going to pass on. Even if you're laid to rest, you won't be at peace, so what's the point? And your people don't even do in-ground burials, do they?" Wang didn't answer. She just kept her head down and eventually repeated, I want to go home. Zhao Yunlan sighed. Wanting to go is one thing. How do you plan on getting there? I haven't decided. Impatiently, he asked, are you planning on thinking about it in broad daylight? Wang stopped talking altogether. Zhao Yunlan glanced at the images of the dilapidated Qingxi village. Somehow, that stone tablet seemed to call to him. The weird earthquake that none of the others had felt, that faraway sound by his ear. He raised his hand, then lowered it. To Wang he said, Here, hide in clarity for a while. You can come out at night. Let me think of something. Wang had already reached her limits. She immediately turned into a wisp of white smoke and vanished into his watch. Curious, Chu Shuji asked, Director Zhao, you're usually lazy enough to grow sprouts, always sending other people on work trips. What's making you go yourself this time? Fuck off. Zhao Yunlan grabbed another bun and stuffed it into his mouth. This is what's known as leading by example. Shun Way had finished his final morning class, and his students were drifting out of the room. He stayed at the podium, organizing lesson plans on the table. Sunlight came flooding in, momentarily blinding him. Shun Wei's hand stilled. Looking down, he saw a golden thread of light hooking in from somewhere outside, wrapping itself around his pendant. He reached to block it, but his fingers passed right through. He couldn't help gripping the radiant little sphere, his heart a tangled mess. The whole day, it had been as if the sight of Zhao Yunlan leaning against the headboard, eyes closed, had been seared into his retinas. Any time he shut his own eyes, the image floated to the forefront of his mind. It haunted him. It was as if, after freezing and starving for thousands of years, he had suddenly turned into an untouchable, tender haven, a haven where everything around him held deathly temptation and swallowed his reason, no matter how he struggled against it. Every time the words Zhao Yunlan drifted into his ear, he sank an inch deeper into the bottomless quagmire. He was already in past his neck. Soon, he would drown. Shun Laoshi! Shun Wei's eyes snapped open. He just barely managed to keep his expression neutral, forcing himself to focus. What is it? It was one of his students. He opened a document folder. Laoshi, here's the itinerary for our ancient customs field research trip. Can you check it over? Shun Wei took off his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. It's only been 2 days since the earthquake there. It's probably not safe. Would you consider delaying the trip for a year? We looked into it. It was only a level 5 earthquake. The houses didn't even collapse. The student pulled up the news on their phone and urgently continued explaining. All the young people from the area work in urban centers, so the only people still living in Qingxi village are the elderly and disabled. There are so few people left to begin with. I'm afraid the earthquake will make those last few people want to move away too. And then how will we find them? We've already submitted our initial report and research plan, and we still have several other places to visit after this. If we delay any more, it'll affect next year's biannual review. Shun Wei's gaze rested on the words Qingxi village. Very well. We'll follow the original plan and leave on Wednesday. Make sure you all prepare thoroughly, and don't bring anyone who's not directly involved. I can't take care of all of you myself. No one had seen Zhao Yunlan all day. In the evening, nearly at the end of the workday, he finally called the office. Ling, Jing, and Zhu Hong had already run off in the boss's absence. Daqing lay sound asleep behind a computer's cooling vents. Zhu Shuji, expression stiff as a coffin, was playing Minesweeper and ignoring everything else. That left Changcheng to pick up the phone. Hello? Xiao Guo? Zhao Yunlan asked. Are you busy? If not, do me a favor. Of course! Changcheng replied quickly. What is it? The hostile energy inside Clarity, my watch, is too intense. Wang can't stay in there for too long. I need to figure out a way to bring her out of town with me in a few days. So, I need to find her a body. Go online and buy me a human-sized doll, something on the bigger side. It'd be best if it can move. Make sure you find one from a store right here in Dragon City and tell them it's urgent. We need it delivered by tomorrow. Changcheng nodded. phone jammed between his shoulder and ear as he did a search. Director Zhao, I found one. Human-sized, flexible joints, can stand. Things seemed busy on Zhao Yunlan's end. Clearly, in a hurry, he interrupted. Okay, sounds great. Buy it. Tell them it's a rush order. Changcheng made an affirmative sound and was about to click buy when his eyes fell on the shop name. It was a sex toy store. The pure little nerd turned crimson, stammering into the phone. Director Zhao, this is a little... Don't worry if it's a little expensive, Zhao Yunlan said. Just remember to get a receipt. Okay, I can't talk anymore. Gotta go. Don't waste time. He hung up, leaving no room for argument. Changcheng stared at the screen and turned to stone. Well, that brings us to the end of this long reading of the first few chapters of Arc 2, which it's technically chapters 13 through 17. I have some notes to discuss with you all, so let's just go ahead and get right into them. So I'm going to start from my top notes, which one thing I guess I wanted to say because of what I was reading toward the beginning. When you're feeling down, just fake laugh until it's real. That's what I'm going to say, because in that part where Dah-ching was laughing and I was just fake laughing and then I ended up laughing for real, that was quite interesting, but it was fun. And I honestly, I had to take a step back and stop recording because I was like, oh shoot, I'm like seriously crying and can't stop. So yeah, whenever you're feeling down, just fake laugh for a little bit. And then next thing you know, you'll be like, oh shoot, I feel actual joy, maybe. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that, oh man, when Shun Wei turned down Zhao Yunlan at the dinner, I am not gonna lie, I did feel bad for him. I really did. But at the same time, I was like, hey man, at least you shot your shot. You may not have gotten what you wanted, but you still were brave. You shot your shot. And then when he rejected you, you backed off, which I absolutely loved. The backing off part. And then I want to know exactly what this illness is that he has or whatever it is he's dealing with health-wise. And of course, I'm sure the cigarettes do not help. Random fact about me, I hate the smell of cigarette smoke. I've never smoked a cigarette, never had the desire to. It's an immediate turnoff when someone smokes cigarettes, although I guess the turnoff aspect shouldn't really matter because I'm married. But from a platonic perspective, I guess it could too. Anyway, yeah, I hate cigarette smoke. So of course, I hate the fact that one of the main characters smokes cigarettes. Nevertheless, that doesn't make me like the story less, just a general fact. The next thing I want to say is Zhao Yunlan, which we knew this already from earlier in the book. He's so dirty. Oh my God. And then had the nerve to be embarrassed when Shun Wei came over because he was dirty. It was like, well, I mean, if your place was just clean, you wouldn't have to worry about this kind of incident now, would you? Now, the thing I will say, I mean, dirty is dirty, but to me, there are two different types of dirty. And I mean like extreme dirty, not just a little dirty. So the first type is the one that I would prefer to see if I'm going over someone's place and it's dirty. And that's just, you know, they have clothes everywhere. Basically everything is everywhere. But if you just put the stuff up, it'll be fine. Then you have the people who have that plus food everywhere, all out over the place. And that's the one that really grinds my gears when it comes to visiting people's houses. Because I'm like, oh my God, why is this food still sitting out? I'm looking at it and I can tell it probably was out overnight. You know, I'm not judging anyone, but I mean, that's just my personal preference. Like, put it away. Food technically shouldn't be out after for like 2 hours out of the fridge or freezer or something, because I think bacteria starts forming and stuff like that. And so then it's like, oh my gosh, and if you're leaving it out forever and then you come back and you're eating it too, oh my gosh, nah. So then the next thing I wanted to talk about is where's his food? Knowing that his refrigerator is empty and the man basically is just doing takeout all the time, that is worrying, because truthfully, a person who does takeout all the time is very unhealthy. I mean, unless they're getting takeout from a very healthy place, which would be very expensive. Actually, it's expensive either way. So I'm like, first off, how much money do you make? And second of all, buy some groceries. I feel like Shun Way right now. Like, what are you doing, sir? Clean your home, take better care of your body, cook actual food. Okay. And then, yeah, when Shun Wei took him home after, he was rescued from the muggers or whatever, I just knew he was going to clean up Zhao Yunlan's place. Like, I felt it in my bones. And he did it. So there we have it. And then the last thing that I will say, well, no, another thing. I'm glad to see that some time has passed and Guo Changcheng is actually doing good at his job. It's definitely sucky to feel useless. I know what that feels like because at one point in life, every year, at least twice a year, I had moments where I just felt useless. So I can relate to that on a personal level, but I'm glad he's somewhere where, well, I don't really know his thoughts on how he feels about where he's working now at this point, but clearly he's doing just fine, And it was also nice to know that he has a kind heart. Nepotism baby or not, which I don't really care about those kinds of things. I mean, if you have the ability to give family members an opportunity at something, I mean, shoot, go ahead and go for it. It's nice to know that he does good things with his money. I mean, I wouldn't look down on him if he didn't help other people, but it's nice that he does. Changcheng is such a little sweetie. Anyway, the last thing I'll say, obviously, Zhao Yunlan and Shun Wei are going to be in Tingxi village at the same time. We just know that is going to happen. So in the next chapter or chapters, we shall see them in the same city. Like, oh my gosh, look at what a coinky ding. Like, oh, 巧合. We've run into each other again. So anyway, we'll see that in the next few chapters. I'm really excited about it. I do want to apologize to you guys just in case you can hear it because I've been having a hard time reading out loud specifically. Like ever since I got COVID, which I don't know how long ago that was now, a month, and then having 3 cycles a month, I've been having a lot of freaking brain fog. And I've noticed that I'm having a hard time reading out loud. Sometimes I'm just a little bit slower, or like the things aren't making sense as fast as possible. So sometimes at the end of videos, I may not have a lot to say because my processing is not the same. There are some times where I feel like I'm just reading the words and not fully retaining them, and so I really do have to go back and listen to my recordings. So anyway, I don't know how much that's greatly affected this video today. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time. 我爱你们